Grace and peace and freedom to you in the name of God who was and who is and who is to come. This past Thursday night, Ivy and I had a great experience. We were invited to go to Sufi Mediterranean food by the Islamic Center of San Diego to join in their interfaith iftar. This is the month of Ramadan for our Muslim brothers and sisters. And so what they do is that they have to fast all day, and then they have this iftar is the breaking of the fast in the evening. And on this one, we were able to join in with all these other folks from different faith traditions and with the wider Muslim community. And it was a great experience. It was, we sat across from some folks who talked about what this meant to them, this month of Ramadan, this time of fasting, and what welcoming people from other traditions was about. We experienced incredible hospitality, a deep community of prayer, and walked away enriched by that whole experience. They asked us the question, do Christians fast? Well, sort of. Yeah, I mean, we have our own way of doing that. I said it's more individualistic for us. We don't really do it all as a community. We don't all decide that there's a month in which we're going to do something together and really. In fact, in the Muslim tradition, if you can't fast because you're traveling or because you have some other kind of condition, or you're too young or you're pregnant or something like that, you can actually make up days later on, or you're supposed to give to the poor during that time, but you can give an extra amount for each day that you can't fast. That's kind of how they get at it. And this may start to sound kind of rule-based, right? Except their rules are because they want to develop their relationships with God and with each other. Just so you know, today, this is what your Muslim brothers and sisters are doing. They cannot eat from 5:41 in the morning till 7:53 at night, because that's when sunrise and sunset are today. And they can't even have a sip of water during that whole time. So that means that when they get to that time, the breaking of the fast, they have a time of prayer. Why would you do all that unless it does something for you? So many times I think when we think about religion, we think about it in terms of rules. Right? The religious rules exist to make us better people. Except we have to remember that the rules are given there for our benefit and for our edification, and not as constraints meant to strangle us. We don't serve rules. We serve God and each other. God gave us the rules and the 10 Commandments, and here's the thing. I think that you can always identify the shadow side of any society by what commandments are you encouraged to break? Right? Which commandments does our society say, oh no, you can break these. In fact, we will honor you if you do. I would say there are two that are uniquely part of our culture. It says, thou shalt not covet. But isn't coveting kind of the basis of our economy? Isn't coveting wanting, it's just never enough, right? I gotta want more. And as soon as I get the new iPhone, doggone it, they come out with a new iPhone. And I'm told that I should want that because it does something that my iPhone doesn't do, although I'm already way behind on being able to utilize the capacities of my current one. But that coveting is part of the thing, and that leads to the other one that we're encouraged to break, and that is the breaking of the Sabbath. We praise people for working 7 days a week. We say that person's dedicated. We don't say what is also true, which is that you're unbalanced. There's something that's happening, and your motivation for working that hard. Now, I get it. I want to be really clear here. If you are trying to live in San Diego and your income means that you have to work multiple jobs to be able to support your family, I am not throwing a stone at you at all. I'm looking in the mirror and at the rest of us who feel like we kind of have to keep on that treadmill to keep up with everybody else. And so what the Sabbath says is we're all going to stop. We're going to have an agreement. No one's going to do business for a day. That means you can't get ahead of me, I can't get ahead of you. We're just gonna stop. Remember the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath. And why should we remember the Sabbath and keep it holy? What is the motivation for us? Not because if you don't, you're a bad person. Not because you're going to make God mad. But we remember the Sabbath for this reason. You were slaves. Remember that there was a time, people of God, when you didn't have a choice if you're going to keep a Sabbath. Because the slave master would put the whip to your back. There was a time in which your life was not your own, but God delivered you from slavery and into freedom. So how do you live as free people? Well, one of the things we do as free people is we take a day off and we go to the beach. We have a picnic. We get together with some friends. We open a bottle of wine and we talk just about whatever. We decide we're going to be incredibly unproductive for 24 hours. And if we do it together, it's a great day. That's what the Sabbath is about. We come here and we get reminded about God's love for us and for all people. And then we go try and live that out. But if you're like me, my task list starts right after worship. And I begin to push in, and I begin to realize that my Sabbath time is sort of just, well, I'll catch up later. But it's not a suggestion, it's a commandment, and it's one that we're encouraged to break. Remember that you were slaves and that now you're free. But I think we oftentimes still live in slavery. Do you know that there are estimated between 10 and 30 million slaves, real slaves, in our world today? People who are, through sex trafficking or human trafficking, are forced into manual labor or into the sex trade. That's across the world. But I would suggest that the number is far higher than that. I would say that we are slaves to our lifestyle. That we feel like, and we phrase it this way. I hear this all the time. People say, I have to work this hard just so I can put bread on the table. But I know that they just bought a new Lexus. It's not true that you have to work so hard to put bread on the table. It's you have to work so hard to maintain your lifestyle. That's okay if you want to just own that. But otherwise, let's not pretend that we're not slaves there. We live in this culture of never enough. I never have quite enough. If I can just get a little bit more, then I will be happy. But you see how it's a postponing of your blessing, and it's a postponing of living fully until some mythical future when what? Sometimes we live as slaves to our past. Hurts that have been done to us or hurts that we have done to other people. And we're just not going to forgive. We're just not going to let go of it. And if we do that, we live in slavery. Our lives are not complete. They're not whole. They're not full of Sabbath rest. And so, when we proclaim the complete forgiveness of all your sins in church, we should take that in and realize that is already done. And so you can let go, really. Really. You know that thing that just haunts you at night? It's time to let go. Live in your freedom. Sometimes, though, we are slaves to religious rigidity, and that keeps us. So instead of thinking that we can have an expansive view of God, we have to think that God's there to punish us if we think dangerous, different thoughts, right? If we imagine God differently than we did from our childhood, that somehow that's not going to be okay with God. But I want you to know that your theology can develop with your life. Jesus's did. The rest of the disciples had their theology develop in their life. And so we never want to exclude all the ways in which we know God through science and through social sciences and through the arts and through music. Ways in which God speaks to us that are including the Bible, but not just. We live in all these cages, but they're cages where the door's already been unlocked. But sometimes I think we prefer it. And so we don't take Sabbath rest, and we forget who we really are. It is for freedom that Christ sets us free. Let no one be enslaved again. And to make the point even further, Jesus takes his disciples, and if you're going to get on him about letting his disciples pick some grain as they walk through a field, you're going to hate what he does next. He gets into the synagogue and he sees a man with a withered hand. That person who has been suffering, and it's the Sabbath. Sometimes I think Jesus waited to do all his healing till the Sabbath, just because he liked to poke the bear. There's 6 other days he could have done this. But he wants to do it now because he's making a theological point. He asked the question, is it lawful to do good or harm on the Sabbath, to save life or kill? Make a choice. Do you think we should be healing people or harming them on the Sabbath? Because you can't be indifferent. You can't decide, I'm just going to say and do nothing, because that is to allow someone to stay in harm. The people choose silence. He asked the question, which do you want, heal or harm on the Sabbath? And all the religious leaders stay silent. And it's one of the few times where it says in the scriptures that Jesus was angry with them. And he says, stretch out your hand, and the man's hand is whole. And he knows that he makes his point. God always works for life and for healing and for goodness. One of the important rules of our relationship with God: we use things and not people. We love people and not things. Sabbath helps us reorient to that. Sabbath says, I'm not going to love the thing that I covet so much that I'm going to work and not be with my friends and my family. I'm not going to let that get in the way. I'm not going to figure out who I will be friends with so I can advance my own status in life. I'm not going to let the rules of society, even the ones that make some sense, get in the way of my relationship with people. Brothers and sisters, right now, at the border, for the first time in our country's history, children are being removed from their parents when they're trying to seek amnesty or cross the border illegally. We have never done that. We have always kept children with their family. But right now, even as young as infants are being taken from their family. And when Homeland Security is asked why are you doing this? They say we have to enforce the rules. Rules are rules. Really? It's a disincentive to people who might try and get into our country, and we hope to not do it for very long. I want to say that this would grieve the heart of Jesus. I don't understand the benefit to the psychological trauma that happens to a child. And I would say that we need to have a different view of who we are serving. Are we serving people, or are we trying to create fear? The Lakota people have this phrase, mitakuye oyasin, which means that we are all related. They remind us that, and they don't mean just the people. They mean all the people, the animals, the rivers, the lakes, the earth. Everything is related and connected. What quantum physics is telling us is that that is more true than we knew, that we are connected to each other and deeply. And so the way that we remind ourselves of that is to enjoy Sabbath, to take time to get away from the rat race, to turn off the news, and to just sit down on the blanket with our friends and some bread. Well, good news. We have bread. We have bread and we have juice and we have wine. We have the opportunity to come back and to take a big breath, to walk away from all that would call for our attention, all the small g gods that beg us to worship them, to return to the big G God, the one that is universal love, the one that we find in each other, and to live fully into our freedom. Amen.